Hello SGD, and a video I've been meaning to do for a while, but it's a very good time now because the links in the description. The Ancient Presence channel have just posted part 2 of a videos of theirs on the Saqqara Serapeum, focusing on how the blocks were moved. Now, there must be some sort of hive where the talking points and the arguments come out by the Lost Ancient High Technologists to sort of throw this wall of questions in there. And you can trace it back to the high gurus of this particular community and where it comes from. But now, amongst the comments there was, I'll begin with, also, where did they get the variety of trees mentioned in the desert? So this is, again, a comment. Where did the Egyptians get their trees? They're all imported. The Egyptians didn't have large forests with big tall trees, but the Egyptians, the Nile Valley and the Delta is one of the most fertile places on earth. They had a lot of their own timber. But one more thing, my car weighs about 1 ton. Their boats can hold the equivalent of 45 Mercedes and float. I wasn't aware of that. Can we demonstrate that as well? So this is, everything must be demonstrated, but the point of that 45 Mercedes and the floating of the boat had to do with the Saqqara Serapeum, and the heaviest box there is 45 tons. So it's this, you can't explain the wood, you can't explain how it was moved. Well, we can go back to one of the prime offenders in this, and so the video by Bright Insight. Bizarre ancient boats found buried at pyramids of Egypt. Cataclysm thumbnail gives it away, but it's always questioning. They're brilliant at their narrative. They really are experts at rhetoric. But let's examine this a little bit further and we can answer a lot of questions. Now, for instance, you can watch the Bright Insight video. It's like this amazing precision engineering. How did they do this as precision engineering? And then he'll swap over and set up a false equivalent and manipulate people and the audience. So this argument is one that he's presented earlier, and you can hear it repeated. So the Serapeum boxes were 45 tons. My Mercedes weighs 1 ton, so a boat can support 45 Mercedes. Can we demonstrate this? Well, this is how it works. So they paint this picture of 45 cars, and now they've given you a false idea of this giant mass. And how can this giant mass fit on a boat? Well, actually, when cars are mainly air. So when you crush it, and even this crushed car, there's a lot of air in there, so that could be crushed down further. So this is one of the ways I'll get you. Okay, but this brings us to Jimmy's video. That brings us to the question of where these alleged boats that would have moved stones as heavy as 1,000 tons. He's pointing out the 1,000 tons. I'm going to address that as well, but they also say, well, 70. How did they move 70 tons? Then he brings up the khufu ship, and even he says, yet this shoddy looking boat, so again, it's like the magnificent precision pyramids and this shoddy looking boat, allegedly for boat for the king. All right, so again, he always says this, these loincloth wearing primitives. So he set it up, well, if they're loincloths, they must be primitives. So, there's another loincloth wearing primitive for you. So again, this is how they operate. Very devious, very, very devious, disrespectful, disgusting, really. Yet here's the irony of it. Proof of ancient lost high technology, they'll show these statues. Well, who's on the statues? Loincloth wearing primitives. The hypocrisy, and they must be aware of this because they're masters at the narrative. But let's go to the khufu ship. So I didn't have a good sideways photo, so there we have a model and a good idea of this shoddy looking boat. This shoddy looking boat is 4,500 years old. All right, so after, any sort of wood after that long, you're doing very, very well. All right. It's 43.2 or 142 feet long. Now, look at this shoddy looking boat. This is less. It's 43 meters and 141 feet, But so this shoddy looking Egyptian ship is pretty much a super yacht, ancient super yacht. Now, this boat itself, this, shoddy looking super yacht, over 400 gross tons displacement. So we'll come to what that means, but you get a good idea of the weight it can support. And so a boat of that equivalent size, how much weight it can support, how much weight it can carry. Now, in regards to size, 42 metres or 137 feet is the unfinished obelisk. So this shoddy looking boat, again put into any sort of comparison, this is not some little dinghy. This is a 4,500-year-old super yacht. All right. Now, where was it stored? It has been recently moved to the new museum, but that's where it was. And there's a picture from the inside of the canopy enclosure room there. It was because of the timber now exposed to the air, so they had to climate control. It was found in a pit, and it had not fallen apart. What it was like an IKEA piece. All the pieces were stored in there. So the oldest surviving boat. How many Phoenician boats survive? The Phoenicians are much closer. How many 12th century, how many 15th century boats survive? So that is survived is fantastic. So again, the surviving boats, you must demonstrate with a surviving boat anyway. Okay, that's some pictures of them putting it back together, and now you get a better idea of how big this is. No little dinghy. This is a pretty big boat. Amongst the boat, more importantly, was a really high quality rope and really lost ancient high technology, not lost at all, knot tying skills. With knots, you can create a crane, lifting devices. This is just how the world used to work back in the time, and what you can do with a single piece of rope and some sticks is quite frankly amazing. We still do that now. We've just replaced wire rope where we had hemp rope, and we've replaced timber with steel. Better materials. Now we have higher, better equipment, but the basics of these equipment go back to antiquity. Lifting equipment is all based on shipping and shipping knots. So, okay, now not only that, there was over 1,200 pieces that put this boat together, including markings of where if they go on the bow or the stern. So instructions. Now the loincloth wearing primitives. Okay, there's a picture of the boat put back together from the inside, and again 4,500 years old timbers. So what's interesting is the way that the boat is put together. It's a sewn boat. It's tied together. Now, you can't just tie a boat together and do a shoelace knot. This also requires that you're able to tension the knots, which means a mechanical advantage and so forth. Now, this is a replica Viking boat where they used copper and iron nails rivets to put it together. But the cool thing is that the design of the ship, the way that it's put together, lasted. Was one that just kept coming back, or lasted continuously for thousands and thousands of years. But the Vikings, Norse, Scandinavian, they also made sewn boats that were held together with rope. The advantage of that is as the boat's moving and twisting in the seas, it has more play and more flex, and is easier to repair while you're on the ocean in a way as well. So again, this ancient technology carried through. And there we can see I've just highlighted, so that's the way that the boat is put together, and it works. Again, these are it works, so it's not just a decorative feature. Again, you can see the knots, and again, they're not just like, you don't just sort of pull them, as much as you can. This also requires some skill in rope manipulation, and rope skills are being lost. Again, just another example how it's tied together. Now we come to this. I'll try to remember to put the link in the article, but he gives some details about the boat, and what he points out is that its displacement was 45 tonnes. Now, since the ship weighs approximately 20 tonnes, that would make it able to carry 25 tonnes of cargo. I looked at this. I don't think this is quite right. All right, so now we're thinking about Eureka and displacement. So Archimedes famously went down into the bath. He noticed that the water level rose and spilled over the engine, and he come across displacement. Now, he wasn't thinking of ships. It was a much more complicated thing a problem he was trying to solve, and that was the purity of metals. But relevant theme now, this comes to the question, how do iron ships float? because people, it's not really, wood doesn't float just because it's wood. It has to do with displacement. So that's the key word. Now, what is displacement? Very simple. Think of the ship beneath the waterline, the section in red. When you go into the water, that water is no longer there. The empty part of a ship is now inside the water. So that water's gone somewhere. There's an energy, a force being applied. So the ship pushes the water away, and the water being, wanting to go back to where it was, the water pushes back. That's the basics of displacement and floating. I'm going to bring up some other stuff now, and there's probably going to be marine engineers who are pulling their hair out and talking about detail. So again, this is a very, pardon the pun, shallow description of what's going on, but essentially sort of correct. So forgive me for any small, little details or whatever, but let's go ahead now. If the ship and the cargo weigh less than the water is, so how much water is being pushed away? How much does that weigh? If that water weighs more than what the ship and the cargo does, it will float. That's the basic principle of it. How much does water weigh? Well, it's going to depend on salt water versus fresh water. Let's stick the Nile, let's stick with fresh water. 1 cubic metre weighs 1,000 kilograms. All right, so now we come back to the khufu ship, solar bark as it's called. Now, again, because we don't have the side pictures, but let's look at these illustrations in this model there. And I've just tilted that a little bit because of the angle of a photo. So now the question is, how much of this boat is sitting in the water? So I've changed it here now, and now you can see, and the water line is still, well, anyway, we have the dimensions of the boat, and is its displacement 45 tonnes? Well, again, we'll do a little bit more. I'll talk more about it in a second, but just for the moment, I don't think that this in itself is correct. But it's not really a big issue, but let's just look at it now. Again, fancy equations, it's you can prove anything with math, but all right, so on the top there you can see that the blue section is essentially what's going to be in the water, what's the water that's being displaced. It's hard math because we have curves now and stuff, so it's not a simple equation to do. So now in those red squares I've shrunk it down to try and fit the little tapers at the end there. All right, so now I'll just use a rough gauge to get an idea. We know that the entire boat is 43.3 metres long, so we have 15.1 metres, and we know the width of the boat 5.9. we have the draft of the maximum draft, so how deep can it go, 1.48 metres. With that I can get to cubic metre value, 131.8 metres cubic. Again, warning, approximation zone here, but it's not so far off as, it's, I might even be a little bit conservative here. It's just very hard without precise measurements to get the exact here, but we're at least on principle. Now, of course, the boat is not a square in profile, it has a curve, so got to try and even that out. So to account for that space, I've said, okay, 66%. So what is 131.8 times 2/3? That's 87 cubic metres of water displaced. 1 tonne of water is 1 cubic metre. So this shoddy looking, 45,000 year old, no, it's 4,500 year old boat, hardened typo there, would displace 87 cubic metres, 1 cubic metre of water, 1,000 kilograms. Mine is a 20 tonne weight of a boat. That's 67 tonnes, or as Jimmy and that crowd like to put it, they'll then give you a number, 147,709 pounds. Oh my God. Well, what about in ounces? Well, that's 2,363,355 ounces. Oh my God. Let's give. All right, 67 tonnes, let's just stick with that. So a boat of this size could easily carry the boxes in the Serapeum. All right, let's just move it out a little bit. Now, if I was just to add 1 row of planking, just to give it a little bit more depth, maybe make it just a tiny little bit wider, I'd easily be able to carry the heaviest blocks of a Great Pyramid. which are 80 tonnes, and that's those in the Grand Gallery. The granite blocks in the King's Chamber are wildly exaggerated as being 70 or 80 tonnes. Nowhere close to that, but 80 tonnes, let's say that they are, and all the bigger stones in the Grand Gallery. Well, a boat of that size, ship, probably a sailor would punch me for calling it a boat, would, again, easily carry. This is proven, established science in regards to displacement. Okay, so I don't have to demonstrate. All right, now, so a very similar designed and sized ship of this weight could move the weights, support those weights deemed as impossible or unexplained by the ancient lost high technology community. They'll also say, well, it's 700 miles, it's 20 million miles away. When you're on the boat, the distance doesn't really matter. It's just you follow the current down. So don't be bamboozled by how did they transport this distance. It's basically a very short distance from the quarry to the river, float it down the river, and a very short distance from the bank of the river to the sites where they built. So all along the Nile. Another interesting idea, I just thought I'd point this out, but that the khufu boat, or at least the basic design of it, is also essentially a floating crane, and that they could, because of the curve, they're on the Nile. This type of boat with the high prow and is for cutting through waves, really ocean-going, sea-going vessels. On the very calm Nile, a barge, which is just a big rectangular box, would be more than good enough. It's a river, doesn't have any rapids along the way. There's not going to be any big waves as well. So why this boat would be shaped like that? Maybe for other reasons, but I think this is an interesting idea. I just thought I'd give an idea of that, but let's move on. Pyramid of Unas. On there is a relief which shows a ship, carrying these monumental, monolithic papyrus columns. Again, Egypt. Okay, let's say that they inherit. Okay, let's give you this one. It's not true, but I don't believe it's. Well, the Egyptians inherited all of this. Okay, then at the very least they could move them. So this is like a hypocrisy. It's like, how did they move them, or they inherited them? But well, okay. Just give you just to highlight it a little bit. All right. Expedition to Punt, Hatshepsut. They made big boats, depicted them. They talked about the vast amount of trade goods and things that come back with them. Also, we get some other, again, these are just illustrations. I was trying to look for the original relief carvings, but again, big ships carrying a lot of weight. Once you understand that principle of cubic meters and displacement, you realise that even small boats, if you make a boat just a little bit bigger, the volume starts to really increase very, very quickly. So a little dinghy is not going to carry much. You make it a little bit bigger, 1.4 longer, wider, deeper, you're doubling it. And then, I won't go into that, but back to Jimmy's video. Hatshepsut talked about the time it took to make the obelisks and how they transported them. This is, the Egyptians let us know this. 2 obelisks, one of them, you can find them at Thebes. One of them's still standing, 143 tonnes, the other one's broken and there's a piece there. So we're looking at about 280 tonnes. Again, this is not a big ship to carry that. And once you get the idea of displacement, cubic meters and weight of water and so forth. And again, this is what the Egyptians told us. The Khufu ship is surviving. We have the images and, well, all right, now here's again the other hypocrisy. Now, #believe Plato. His great uncle's best friend, second cousin, told him, the Egyptians told that fellow what happened 10,000 years ago, and we accept that at face value, even though we don't have the original copies. Now, that's the curious thing, is that the Lost Ancient High Technologists want, well, I want every little bit of evidence. I want it with a stamped and a notary and everything on there. Well, let's put that back on them. So if we must believe Plato's story about what happened 10,000 years ago going through all these other hands. Well, why don't we believe Plato is essentially saying believe the Egyptians about what happened 10,000 years ago, but we don't believe the Egyptians about anything else because they're loincloth wearing primitives. This is it's not just the evidence or the way they present it, it's also just this the logical inconsistency that goes through their points. So if they present one, okay, let's believe Plato, then we have to believe the Egyptians, which come much earlier than that. So, so look, you can move the Serapeum boxes, you can move the big columns and the other giant blocks, but the alleged boats to transport 1,000-ton blocks, well, we don't have those, okay, but we go again back to Hatshepsut. It's not who knows exactly how accurate the image is, but it doesn't take, the boat does not have to be that much bigger than the object that you're moving. Alright, so alleged boats, well, okay, these are the Nemi ships of Caligula. Unlike other Roman barges which transported massive obelisks across the Mediterranean, not just down the Nile, but across the Mediterranean Sea, these Nemi ships survived because they got buried in mud, and then they drained the lakes. These were the ships that they found. Unfortunately, during World War II, these were amongst a whole bunch of excellent old Roman stuff that got destroyed during the war. But luckily we did get a sneak peek and some photos of them. So these are 240 feet long, and because basically the bottom of the frame survived, probably a little bit longer with the plough, but the front and the back. 240 feet, 73 metres long, 79 feet or 24 metres wide. Put it another way, that's basically a little bit shorter than two unfinished obelisks. By these Nemi ships would have easily carried the unfinished obelisk or the Ramesseum statue. So let's do a little zoom in, and just to give that idea. So, like, oh my God, look, it's huge. Okay, look at that. Okay. Not a problem, no drama at all to carry this. No doubt about that. These Roman ships, ancient Roman ships made of wood, could have carried these. Okay, so when I say, oh, but these are Roman ships, well, if it's hard to believe that the Egyptians could build a bigger barge, this will be questioned by the defenders of Lost Ancient High Technology, but advanced ancient high technology is a reasonable assumption to make. All right, so we go. There is a gap from an Egyptian wooden ship to a Roman wooden ship, but ancient Rome, apart from iron, really didn't have any material or technology which was that much different from the ancient Egyptian. So to go from an ancient Egyptian ship is really a small step to get to an ancient Roman ship. However, ancient Egyptian ship jumping to advanced ancient lost high technology is a huge leap. So I am making a case and making some assumptions because we don't have the physical Egyptian ship, but the khufu ship is build it just a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, a little bit deeper, and then you start carrying really big weights and put a couple of them together to make a barge, and then, well, now you're going to carry 1,000 ton. But to make this little jump to a big jump, well, what's more reasonable? Put it this way, when it comes to this type of reasoning, this giant leap, if you were to apply that to them in a court case, then they would be very reasonable and rational and evidence-based. But when it comes to lost high technology, we must just, anyway. So back to Jimmy and Amenqueto, and again, this is just you see these comments all the time. They're always got the same talking points. They're always painting the same picture. For instance, this thing about using cars as an example of weights. you're better off using a big block of steel or something, but a car is full of air. So when you hear 45 cars, you picture this giant object, but it's, when you think about that, cars are crushed down there, it can fit in the is it the hood, like we call it the boot, the bonnet? What's that little part at the back? What's the American word for that? Yeah, pop the hood, that's the one. All right, now. So now, again, can we demonstrate that? This is the new tactic used by ancient Lost High Technology. You can't drill, you can't create corners, you can't cut. But when you present, well, yes, you can. Here's how you do it. Now they've moved to, well, you must replicate you must do a giant box, or you must replicate moving 45 tons. Can we demonstrate that? Okay, yes we can. Look, here's like, it's so easy to do, because actually we don't have to demonstrate it at all, because this is just modern history, old-fashioned wooden boat, rope and wood. The load of stone they're carrying, you can tell by the guys who's standing there. So it's approximately a metre higher than that, but 4 metres wide, probably wider, and 6 metres long. Exactly hard to tell, but get a good idea. So we give you 24 cubic metres. Stone per cubic metre weighs a lot more than water. It's if it's sandstone, about 2.4. If it's granite or basalt, maybe up to 3 tonnes. So this load of stone is 48 tonnes up to 78 tonnes in weight. That's a Serapeum box. So to all of the, and the other people who do these talking points and insist we must see demonstrations, well, just learn something. Just look around. If you're not willing to learn the most basics, it's no one's responsibility to go into an expensive demonstration, because it's already been done. It doesn't need to be. This is proven, established, case closed. So Lost Ancient High Technologists will demand demonstrations of well-known and long-proven principles. They'll ask for experiments that they're not willing to do themselves, and then not cover them. So it really is a denial of reality to preserve a system of belief. It's #believe Plato, because the dynastic Egyptians told him about what happened 10,000 years ago, while denying the dynastic Egyptians on everything else, even the hard physical evidence. This is how it works. And here's the Lost Ancient High Technology evidence storage facility. So when, again, Lost Ancient High Tech, you demand this, I want to see this. What have you got? I demand to see, just give me one piece of evidence of this advanced ancient Lost High Technology. Where is it? Where's your evidence? You don't have any. You use narratives, arguments, false equivalence. This is how it works, and it's just part of it's just happening more and more. I suppose in the information age, we're actually, well, what was called the information age. It's more like the disinformation age, because it's allowed. Everyone should have a voice. I'm 100%. No, everyone. I'll die on the hill to give. I'll give Bright Insight, Brian Foster, Uncharted X. Yes, you have the right to say these things, absolutely, and I will defend that very, very rigorously. But we have a right to respond to that. But you also have a responsibility to not pollute youth with obviously false ideas, and not to do any work at all. So you demand this, you demand that. Well, I demand that you learn the basics. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. You should at least do a little bit of research into topics which you, again, claim to care about. They're making money off them. They're doing very well out of this. But yeah, Lost Ancient High Technology, there is zero evidence, and well, that's going to be I demand that Lost Ancient High Technology. I'll show you how people move things. There's demonstrations of them moving things. Here's how we can understand shipping and weight, and just a long established, well proven underpinning of marine engineering. What have you got? Nothing. So, absolutely, with wood and rope you can move and lift weights across land. Absolutely, you can move very heavy weights with ships and ancient shipping. Absolutely, you can work any stone with the primitive tools that were available. And where's this lost ancient high technology evidence? The evidence is, well, you can't be explained, therefore lost ancient high technology. Well, if it can be explained, and even if there is a gap, it's a very small gap. It's like ancient Egyptian ships to ancient Roman ships. Well, what have you got? Come on. I demand that you present evidence. That's it. Have a good one.